The Farms.com Wheat Report is brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada.
I'm Faye Dokken-Bouchard, and I'm the Provincial Specialist Plant Disease with Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. Well, when you start scouting for the leaf diseases, you'd be taking a look at the lower leaves to see if there's any signs of spotting. So there could be some flecking showing up on the lower leaves, some yellow spots, or possibly some larger lesions showing up. So you'd be scouting through the crop to see if you see any of these early signs of disease. And the way that leaf spots work is they usually start on those lower leaves and then work their way up to the rest of the plant. So that's why we're focusing on the lower leaves to start. I think it's also important to keep in mind before you even go out to the field to think about what your past field history might be to help determine that level of risk that you might have. So if we look at past years, leaf spots are the most common disease that we see on wheat. So they actually show up in our surveys, and 100% of the crops that we survey in Saskatchewan have at least a trace amount of leaf spots. So they are a really common disease, and so there is a good chance that you will have at least some level of that disease showing up in your crop. But the important thing is to assess how bad it is and what the risk is going to be for this year, and a lot of that will also have to do with the weather conditions. Well, some other diseases that we might be looking for would include the rusts. So if you're out in the field and you're seeing some symptoms and trying to tell the difference, rusts produce pustules, whereas the leaf spotting diseases produce lesions. So a pustule will be raised. The pustule itself is actually a bunch of rust spores that form on the surface of the leaf, and so if you rub that spot, a rust pustule will actually, those spores will come off onto your finger, and so you'll see some orange or yellow discoloration depending on the type of rust it is. So you might see a leaf rust, which would be spots of pustules, or you could see stripe rust, which would be rows of those pustules joining together to form a line or that stripe on the leaf. So either of those would produce pustules that the spores could rub off, whereas the lesions for the leaf spotting diseases will be not able to rub off. They'll be either yellow or tan or brown in color, and they could be of various shapes and sizes depending on the type of leaf spot as well. So with Septoria tritici, those will be restricted within the veins, so more of a rectangular shape. Tan spot is more of an oval, tan colored lesion, and then the other spots you might see kind of somewhere in between those two shapes or a combination. You can consider a fungicide application to help prevent the disease from spreading from those lower leaf symptoms that you find early on, to protect the flag leaf, which will be the leaf stage that will have the most contribution to your yield. So basically the top two leaves, so the flag leaf and the penultimate leaf, the photosynthesis that takes place on those leaves contributes the most to the seed filling, so the yield that's being produced. So if you do have symptoms showing up on the lower leaves, you want to protect those top two leaves from getting disease, because when a lesion forms on a leaf, really think about, say you have a brown spot on a green leaf, where anything that's not green will not be able to undergo photosynthesis. So that's why you'll have an impact on the yield, because it's the photosynthesis that really charges everything for your plant. So protect the flag leaf, protect the top two leaves. So timing of the fungicide application is really important. Referring to your fungicide labels in order to help make those decisions is also really important. Keeping an eye on the weather conditions, because if we have dry conditions around the time that the seed filling is taking place and that those top two leaves are there, you're not going to have as much of a disease risk, and so a fungicide application it might still have a benefit, but it might not be enough of a benefit to pay for the application, because you might have not had enough disease pressure to cause a huge impact on your yield when you have dry conditions. Whereas if we have wet conditions, that's really conducive for the disease development. It's conducive for the disease spread as well, so it's going to be more worthwhile to spray in that case. So something to keep in mind about the leaf spotting diseases is they are a polycyclic disease, and that's why you can get spread of early symptoms, early lesions up into the upper leaves. So you'll get spores forming on those early lesions and spreading up to the upper leaves. So you could have multiple disease cycles where your lesions are continuing to spread every time you get a rainfall that's spreading the spores from the lower to the upper leaves. So really a fungicide application is geared to identify those early symptoms and then use the application to prevent another disease cycle from occurring at a stage that is going to have the most impact on the yield. So this would be in contrast to a disease like Fusarium head blight, which is a monocyclic disease. It only has one disease cycle per season. So the idea with controlling Fusarium head blight is to protect that critical stage where Fusarium head blight can infect, which is at the flowering stage. And that's really the only time that the disease can take place for Fusarium head blight. And once you see symptoms of Fusarium head blight, it's too late to control. It's already happened because it only has that one disease cycle. You're not going to prevent additional disease cycles from occurring because there is only that one cycle. So that's something to keep in mind as well with different diseases, that they will have different cycles. So we're always stressing the importance of crop scouting for certain diseases like leaf spots, where those early symptoms will be important to identify. Whereas for Fusarium head blight, it's more important to think about your past history of the disease, as well as the weather conditions that are really important around that critical stage for infection. So that would be also the fungicide application would be an option. Any of the cereal diseases as well, you can use crop rotation. We know that minimum till is really important. There's various reasons to follow that practice for agronomy, but if you did also till the crop residue under, that would help to speed up the breaking down of the material in the previous inoculum from past year's disease incidents. You could also stress the importance of clean seed. So while you're not going to directly get Fusarium head blight from Fusarium infected seed, you're still introducing Fusarium into the field if you have Fusarium infected seed, and so that could leave you more at risk to Fusarium head blight in future years. But the fungicide application is something that you can use to suppress the disease. It won't fully control it, but if you can apply a fungicide around that flowering time, then you can prevent the infections from taking place.
The Farms.com Wheat Report has been brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada. Visit www.clearfield.ca/wheat for more cereal solutions.